Just welcome everyone to the BLN's Black Leadership Network's talk today with probably he's going to be modest, but he is the one of the greatest the greatest historian. I'm biased on the Negro Leagues in the country. I am guarantee you all would be impressed with the level of knowledge that he has, and he's definitely going to he's going to leave you wanting more, to learn more, and to want to know more about the league and everything else that has happened. We had talked multiple times. Phil and I had talked multiple times about how we wanted to frame this, what was the best way of talking about it, and what we decided, as well as with the BLN team, was to talk about what happened. Many people, it's in all our history books about Jackie Robinson breaking the color line, and but we really don't know, and we know some of the story of Jackie Robinson, but we don't really know on both sides what happened to some of the other Negro League players, as well as what else happened to the Negro Leagues itself after Jackie Robinson came into the league. So we're going to touch on all those different topics and some other things. And again, anyone, we did it this format mostly because Phil's a personable guy, and you're going to love him as soon as he starts talking. It's just who he is. And we wanted you guys to be able to, as opposed to just staying in the chat like we normally do, if you have any questions, just pop your head up and just scream out, and we'll not allow you, but you can ask a question face to face. So we're going to, the format was going to be similar, but what we're going to do this time is allow you guys to ask the questions to yourself. And yeah, so without any further ado, I want to introduce to everyone Mr. Philip Ross, Negro League historian. Mr. Ross, if you can, please just give us an intro into your background and your history.
Before I do that, John, I want to thank you for inviting me here. I really appreciate it. You know my passion about this, and any opportunity I can get to discuss Negro Leagues and share it with folks, I always appreciate, and you invited me, and I thank you very much. And but I have to thank one other person. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my wife. John knows I'm not technological at all, and if it wasn't for my wife, I couldn't have learned the things I've learned about the Negro Leagues, or even beyond today. So Louise has helped me with this. She's met a lot of the players that I've met. They probably like her better, but without her, I wouldn't be here, be able to do this at all. As far as my background, I grew up in the Bronx. I moved to Queens. I was in my 30s, and Louise and I have been married 42 years. And I told her the day we met, I said, I like baseball, and I play it. And I play softball. I still play fast pitch softball. And I fell into the Negro Leagues in 1962 when I read Satchel Paige's autobiography, and I was really taken by it. I'd heard of Satchel Paige. There probably were things in my head about Black leagues. I know that there was segregation in America, but his book really opened my eyes, and I started learning more and more and more. In 1970, a gentleman by the name of Robert Peterson wrote a book. Oh, I'll advertise it right now. He wrote this book, Only the Ball Was White. And I read it, I absorbed it. It's come out in another edition a few years later. So if you ever see it like this, they're both the same book. This is updated slightly. Either book is better. This one's much cheaper. The other one's more expensive, and it's in paperback. I read his book, and it really opened me up to the world of the Negro Leagues and many other people in the United States. So a lot of historians got involved and started to study more and more. And with the studying came more discussion and more writing. And I really jumped into it. I'm fascinated by it. The players that I've met, and I've met several hundred. There are not many alive now. The players that played before Jackie Robinson, I don't think that any, a couple of played 1948 are around, but now it's the players who played after Jackie Robinson. And John wanted me to go into that, so I will. I did just a little more bio. I taught school in private schools, and I taught in public schools. John, can you see me?
Yeah, I see you.
Oh, okay. I don't know why you got Tony Stone up there, but she was a nice lady. But I didn't get to her yet, so take her off. Goodbye, Tony. Goodbye. Goodbye. Bye, Connie. So long. Okay. I taught in a private school and public school in New York. I'm the only teacher anywhere that teaches Negro League baseball to fourth graders, but I've taught it at all levels in libraries, Museum of Natural History, colleges, and I'm really fascinated by it. I want people to know about it. I'm sorry the Yankees and Mets don't do anything to recognize the Negro Leagues. That's tragic. That's tragic, especially the Yankees. They used to rent out Yankee Stadium to Negro League teams, and they got paid for it, good money. Maybe something will happen. But that's pretty much about it. I retired from teaching 10 years ago. I do a lot of writing. I do a lot of poetry on the Negro Leagues. I want people to know more. And if anybody has questions, that's why I'm here. John, should we start with Jackie?
Let's start with Jackie.
Good. Put up his first picture.
Here we go.
You got this one up?
Yeah, can you see it?
Yeah, good. Okay. So Jackie Robinson got signed in October 1945 by Branch Rickey, who was the president of the Brooklyn Dodgers. The Dodgers had a board of directors, and Branch Rickey had to sell it and sell the idea of hiring a black player. And he did it very easy. He said, you want to make money? I'll make you money. Brooklyn's loaded with blacks. They'd love to come see him. So, of course, the Dodgers were in favor. The other thing was the prior baseball commissioner, Kennesaw Landis, who was appointed in 1920, died in 1944. And Landis stood against integration from the beginning to the end. But once he died and a new commissioner was appointed, his name was Al Chandler, his nickname was Happy. The president, Branch Rickey, called him up in, it must have been sometime 1945, and said, how would you feel about us hiring a black player? And the commissioner had been in the Pacific and toward the end of World War II, or just after World War II ended. And he said, if blacks can die on Guadalcanal, they could play baseball. So Rickey knew that the door was open and he could sign a black player. And he went out searching for the right person. And everybody's always heard the right guy. And Jackie was the right man. No
and
question.
what did that mean, Phil? I mean, I know you and
we
talked about
yeah.
it. But
right.
What does that mean for the broader audience?
Okay. The right person. He was the right person for several reasons. One, he was a talented athlete. He was a 4-sport athlete at UCLA. And baseball was not his best sport, but he was a very good baseball player. In 1945, he played for the Kansas City Monarchs in the Negro Leagues, and he made the All-Star team that year. So he was a talented athlete, no question about it. He also had played integrated sports in college at UCLA. And he also had been in the Army, where he got court-martialed because he wouldn't move his seat on the bus. And he said, I'm not moving. And he was court-martialed, found not guilty. He learned how to be angry without being violent. And when he met with Mr. Rickey, it's one of the interesting things as a school teacher, you look back in history and learn a lot of things. And most people involved in history don't know it until after. Well, Jackie Robinson and Branch Rickey knew they were involved in history right at the beginning. they knew they were changing baseball and probably America. And that was very, very important. Now, Mr. Rickey and Jackie had reached an agreement because Rickey knew Robinson was going to have a tough time. You know, the racism was going to be terrible. And he said, you can't fight back. And the agreement was no fighting back for 3 years. And it was tough because after the first day of spring training in 1947, now he played 1946 for the Montreal Royals and had a very successful year on a very good team in the International League, the minor leagues. And the International League was the best minor league. And he had a very good season. When he went to the Dodgers in 1947, the first day of spring training, he was ready to quit after the first day. But Mr. Rickey had kind of anticipated things. He had two black writers go along with him, and they sat down. They said, Jack, everyone's depending upon you. When he said everyone, he meant everyone in the United States that was black. He was a big deal. Whites were kind of in anticipation, but for the black community, Jackie Robinson breaking the color line was a big, big stuff. Big stuff. Willie Mays says, every time I look in my wallet, I thank Jackie Robinson. He really opened things up. And what he brought to, so he learned not to fight back. After 2 years of the 3-year agreement, Mr. Rickey said, Jack, you've done it. Almost every team is looking for more black players now. You've done it. The deal's off. You want to hit somebody now? Go ahead and hit him. And when word got out that he could hit, they backed off. He was a big, strong man, and he loved to win. He also brought to the National League the Negro League style of play. Negro League teams had 14 or 15 players on each, and they played a very hustling, aggressive game. And Jackie Robinson became a very, very famous base runner. He could get into a rundown. He could score. He could steal bases. John, put on the next slide of Jackie Robinson. Yeah, that's it. If you take a look, this picture is from 1951, I think. Yeah, 1949. It's a game against the Philadelphia Phillies. Robinson had hit a double. He was on second base, and he stole third base. And the next batter hit a ground ball to the infield, and Robinson tried to score. The throw was made home. He got into a rundown. But just look at this picture. You've got five. The third baseman is up near third base. Jackie Robinson's in front of him. And then you got the catcher. And after him, I think the second baseman, the shortstop, and the pitcher back on home plate. They were terrified when Robinson got on base. And that was a Negro League style of play. A lot of hustling, aggressive ball playing. You learned how to run back and forth, make the other guy make a mistake. And Robinson was an expert. He got tagged out on this play. He was out. But it's just an indication of the fear he put into other teams and the influence he had as a very, very talented athlete. Put Jackie away, just briefly, or for a while. Bye, Jack. Now we got Jackie's broken the color line, and what's going to happen? There are still Negro Leagues playing. 1947 they played, and they had their seasons, and they were organized, and they had their championships, their all-star game. However, the white team started to say, hey, there's money out there. Brooklyn was selling out their stands. People are coming out to games everywhere.
Actually,
Jackie went.
excuse me 1 second, Phil, because
Yeah.
I said this before, and I didn't realize it until we spoke a couple of days ago. But I didn't realize that blacks, for some reason, I didn't think parks were segregated, but you said that there were black people that did attend Major League Baseball games.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Some stadiums were segregated. St. Louis was segregated. I don't know of the others. Again, those of you watching, remember there were 16 teams, not 30 teams. And there was nobody in Atlanta. The St. Louis was probably the most over, away from the heartland, nobody out in California. So some stadiums were segregated, not all of them, certainly not the ones in New York. and blacks attended Major League Baseball. They enjoyed it. It was a good brand of baseball. But they also attended Negro League games, and Negro League games were also attended by whites, especially if they wanted to see some great players, and occasionally they did. It was mostly blacks who were seeing it, but a lot of whites went to Negro League games. A lot did. Did I answer you, John?
No, yeah, that's good. That's interesting. I didn't even know that. I didn't know that whites went to the Negro League games.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, not in the numbers that blacks did, but they did, and they just did. Anyway, after Jackie broke the color line, within months, the white team started looking seriously toward good black players. In July, Cleveland signed the first black player in the American League, and that was Larry Doby. He had played with the Newark Eagles, and the Eagles kind of got raided a little bit. They had an owner. Their owners were a husband and wife, Abe Manley and his wife, Effa Manley. And Effa Manley, because of her hard work, her husband was the numbers king in Newark, New Jersey. And he was also secretary of the Negro American League. And he was kind of busy with things. She ran the team. She made the schedules, got the uniforms, signed players. She was really something, attended every league meeting. And I'm trying to think of the number. I think 15 years ago, she became the only woman elected to baseball's Hall of Fame.
Wow.
Her name is Effa Manley. Her plaque hangs up on the wall by Babe Ruth and Ty Cobb and Jackie Robinson. And that woman deserves to be in the hall. She was terrific. And but she was very angry when her team started to get raided by the white major league teams. And she had newspaper articles come out, interviews, and said, "You owe us money. You're going to take my players. I want money." And she was able to get some money for players that were signed off of her roster. And one of the players was Larry Doby, who was the first black player in the American League playing for the Cleveland Indians. And he was a talented fellow. I've met him a few times, and nice man. So
actually, that was can you say, because that was interesting trivia, there was another black player on the Dodgers, you said, right?
Yes. Well, signed the first in April when Jackie Robinson broke the color line, the Dodgers had signed Dan Bankhead, who was one of the 5 Bankhead brothers. And he pitched with the Dodgers. He wasn't very, very successful with them. As I said to you before, John, a number of Negro Leaguers went into Major League Baseball and they weren't successful. And among the reasons are playing in these white stadiums in front of predominantly white audiences, and not with the comfort of their teams. It was just tough. It was very hard. Like I said before, it's like playing in a foreign country almost. And the racism was more highlighted because it was more focused on these just 1 or 2 players. So Bankhead didn't have a very successful career with the Dodgers, but he was the other black player on the Dodgers. And then, like I said, Larry Doby got signed and several other players were signed. And there's lists of who broke the color line for which team and when did it happen. The Yankees' first black player was Elston Howard, and he started to play with them in 1955. But the Yankees were rather racist and anti-Semitic. But finally, they signed Elston Howard. And the last major league team to hire a black player was the Boston Red Sox with a player named Elijah Green. His nickname was Pumpsy. And he was signed in 1959, I think 12 years after Jackie Robinson. So it wasn't easy. And it wasn't easy for the players, the black players that got signed. There was a certain comfort playing in the Negro Leagues. You were with your folks and nobody was so angry and hateful and all that. But they knew that, the big money was to come into the major leagues. And the real opportunity was there. Hank Aaron was a kid when Jackie broke the color line, and he was excited. It gave him a chance. Willie Mays they were all excited. All the black players were in the Negro Leagues and folks around the country. It was a really, really big deal. The white community, it was a nice thing. It was almost a novelty. It was kind of nice, this guy, this player. But in the black community, it was a big, big deal. Big deal.
That's interesting. So my next question to you was, can you speak on the quota system that the teams had, the unofficial quota system?
Yeah, absolutely. There was never a rule in Major League Baseball, the American League and National League. There was no rule against having black players on a team. However, the commissioner and many of the owners agreed not to have a black player. I've heard some people call it a gentleman's agreement. I don't use that phrase because gentlemen don't treat people that way. So I won't use that. After Jackie got signed and after the majors started to get integrated, there was an unofficial quota. You could have blacks on a team, but not too many. Not too many. 4, not bad. 6, you're pushing it. You're pushing it, and that's probably pushing it too hard. And that quota lasted into the early 1960s. And it had a great effect on a lot of players. 2 friends of mine, my friend Jonathan Clyde Paris. Do you have his picture up, John? Clyde Paris. Well, I'll speak about him while you're getting him. Clyde lived, I called him Clyde, everybody did, in Queens, a few miles away from me. And we got friendly when he was in his late 80s. And he never was famous. He never did card shows, never invited to these wonderful things. And you got his picture up? Or I'll put it up.
Looking for it. Hold on.
Okay.
It's towards the tail, it's towards the end.
It's toward the end, Louis said. Okay, but this is Clyde Paris.
There he goes.
Okay. Now, Clyde played in the Brooklyn Dodgers organization, and he was a talented infielder, very good third baseman, and a very good hitter. In fact, the International League, which is where the Montreal Royals played, was the top. No, that's Josh Gibson, and he was better than me. Keep going. That's Gil. Okay, there he is. There's Clyde. The International League was the top minor league. The Montreal Royals was one of the best teams in the International League. And Clyde was a very good third baseman, excellent third baseman, and a very good hitter. In I want to get my figures correct, 1956, he led the International League in hitting, batting .321. If you can hit .321, International League 1956, you're a major leaguer. And he was in the Dodgers organization. And this was the team that signed Jackie Robinson and Roy Campanella, Don Newcomb. They never brought Clyde up to play third base. And in 1956, they needed a third baseman. In fact, they went out and traded for Randy Jackson from the Cubs. But Jackson only played about half the games. Jackie Robinson played the other half of the games at third base. And they both batted in the 270s, Robinson and Randy Jackson. But, they had Clyde Paris in their own farm system. They didn't have to trade anybody. They could have just brought him up. But it would have been another black player along with the others. So Clyde didn't get that chance. The other player who was affected by this quota was, John, if you can get the picture of Pedro Sierra.
It should be after Clyde.
It should be after Clyde. Yeah. This is my friend Pedro Sierra. He lives in South Jersey, and Pedro and I are very, very close friends. Pedro came to the United States in 1954, where he played with the Indianapolis Clowns for a year. A couple of years later, was playing for the Detroit Stars. He also played in the Mexican League. In the Army, pitched a no-hitter. He's a very, very good pitcher. He went to a spring training with the Washington Senators, who at the time were managed by Ted Williams. And he was cut. He was cut from the team at spring training. And so he was told by a coach that, we don't want you, take your stuff, goodbye. I'm sure they said this very politely. And as he was leaving, Ted Williams saw him leaving. And Williams yells out to him. He said, "Hey, kid, where are you going?" and turned around and he said, I was cut. He said, come here, come here. He walks over and he said, who cut you? He said, the coach told me, and so I'm leaving. He said, you come back here tomorrow morning. Williams wanted him. However, that night, Williams was told by ownership, we have enough black players.
Wow.
Don't even think about it. So that was the quota system. That's how it affected two friends of mine, but it affected so many more players that they just didn't have a chance. They just didn't have a chance. And it was a quota system. You can look at the numbers on the rosters and you can see it. It's very evident that there was that quota in play. It started breaking down after 62, 63, 65, 66, and that was a plus. However, I did some checking of numbers today, and between 1947 and 1967, 21 years, the American League had 2 rookies of the year, the National League had 11. The American League in that same period of time, 47 to 67, American League had 3 most valuable players, National League had 14. So the talent certainly was there. It's just that they weren't given a chance. Thank you, John. Send Pedro home. I spoke to Pedro this morning, by the way, and he's excited by what I'm doing today. He is. He was really happy about it. I also spoke to Gil Black, another Negro Leaguer that played in the 50s. They like it. They appreciate the fact that you're learning more and learning about what they did and how hard they worked to make baseball a better game, which is what it is. Okay, did that cover your quotas?
Yeah. So what was going on in the Negro Leagues? Like, how were they surviving during this time?
Okay. After Jackie signed and other teams within 2 years, Negro Leagues was suffering terribly financially. And you got to remember, they didn't have white money, and it was tough surviving before Jackie signed. After he signed, it was more difficult. And a number of teams went out of business. One team, the Indianapolis Clowns, in 1952, hired a woman to play second base. You could put on Tony Stone, please.
Got it.
Good. Thank you. Tony Stone was, well, I don't like to talk about women's ages, but she was close to 30 when she was signed to play with the Clowns. And she had played in mixed gender baseball leagues in various parts of the country, most notably New Orleans. And she was talented and she was a very good player. She was hired to play second base, which she did. John, should I tell him who played shortstop when she played second?
Sure.
Oh, no, not Connie. Put it back. Go back to.
Oh, sorry.
Normally, I'll say to somebody, I'll give you $100 if you could tell me who played shortstop next to her when she played second base. And my wife is raising a hand right now. She wants the 100. The shortstop who played next to Tony Stone was a player you've all heard of. He passed away recently. It was Hank Aaron.
Wow.
The Indianapolis Clowns were his first professional team, and he played next to Tony Stone. He was signed by the Braves organization late in the 1952 season, and he left the team, but he was there with her. She played for 1 year with the Clowns and then was traded to the Kansas City Monarchs. The Clowns then hired 2 women. Let's go to Connie Morgan.
That's above it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's Connie Morgan. And she took over at second base, playing for the Clowns. Now, I knew Tony Stone, just to go back to a story about her that she told me.
And Phil, even before you go into that story, like, they were playing ball. It wasn't like they were just on the team. They were.
No, they played.
They played.
Oh, yeah. Oh, batted and fielded and ran and threw and everything. In fact, they wanted Tony to wear a skirt when she first signed it. She said, no way, no way. And she wore a uniform like the men did. But one of the stories she told me was once on a bus ride, one of the men from her team was teasing her because she was a woman. So being a lady, she picked up a bat and tried to kill him. It took 3 of her teammates to stop her. He never teased her again. He never teased her again. But like I said, I knew Toni. She's a lovely lady. There was an off-Broadway play that my wife and I saw a couple of years ago about her. It's a very good book about her called Curveball. And Connie Morgan, I never met, but she was talented. She was a very good player, came from Philadelphia, and she was very good. Among one of my favorite players of all time, go to the next picture, Mamie Johnson. Mamie Johnson was the only woman who pitched in the Negro Leagues. And Mamie, she was a little woman, and she was pitching a game in Kansas City against the Kansas City Monarchs. And one of the players said, "That peanut's going to try to get me out." And that became her nickname. It was Mamie Peanut Johnson. Mamie and I became friends about 25 years ago. And I loved her. I mean, she was one. I was looking at a book last week, and she autographed it for me, and she wrote, "To my second husband." We were really close. Every time she was honored somewhere, "Phil, you have to be there." I went to South Carolina, the state of her birth, and went to the town where she came from. They named a street for her, and you got to be there. I went there, went to Kansas City. About 6 or 7 years ago, she calls me up and said, "Phil," she lived in Washington, D.C. "They're going to name a park for me. You have to come. You have to be there." So I loved her, and I kidded with her, and I said, "Well, I'll be there if my knees are okay." She said, "What's the matter with your knees?" "There's nothing wrong with my knees." I said, "From begging my wife to let me come." But not only did my wife let me come, my wife came with me, and my sister-in-law came, and we had a great time. Mamie and I were very close friends. She was great with kids, and she was a very good pitcher. When she passed away, I remember Pedro called me up to tell me that she had died, and I called the family that evening and expressed my condolences. The next day, they called me up and asked me to speak at her funeral, which
Wow.
is, it was an incredible honor. It really was. When I was speaking about her, I said, one of the loneliest places in sports is the pitcher's mound. You can't hide behind anybody. You can't go anywhere else, and nothing happens until you start it.
Right.
And so it's a tough place to be in. Here's a woman on a men's team pitching against men. She was something special. She was really, really special. And again, the Clowns were able to advertise woman player, woman pitcher, and they did sell tickets. But that was one of the problems the Negro Leagues had. Teams folded. A lot of players opened up. A league was up in Canada and northern, above the Dakotas. It was called the Manitoba Dakota League. And a lot of Negro Leaguers that couldn't get into the major leagues because if they were 32, 33 years old when Jackie Robinson was signed, they were too old for the majors, who weren't signing a lot of black players anyway.
Right.
So the teams, kind of condensed a little bit, and the Clowns were able to stay in business for quite a while. They were, when I said Clowns, do you have that other picture of the 3 players, one on top of the other? The Clowns, can you see that? I don't know if you can see what I'm holding up, John.
Yeah, I got it here. This one?
Yeah, good. Yeah, that one. They always had somebody in a clown suit. They always had a little person. The gentleman at the bottom, Billy Vaughn, I knew him. The gentleman at the top of those 3 is Birmingham Sam Bryson. Excuse me, Birmingham was a very talented baseball player. And for those of you that may have seen the film Bingo Long and the Traveling All-Stars, he was in the film. And the gentleman over to on the right in the picture, I believe that is King Tut. His name was Richard King, called himself King Tut, and played everywhere. He was a funny guy on the team. He had a first baseman's mitt that was about 2.5 feet long that he would go out and play with. The Clowns did a lot of clowning around, but they had talented players.
And can you explain that? Because you had said that Phil, you had said that about Bingo Long, and explain why you said that that was, as you explained this story, but why that was a good depiction of what the
Oh,
teams
yeah.
had to do for promotion. Because I don't
Oh,
think people who saw it understood the relevance of it to the degree that you can explain it.
well, Bingo Long and his Traveling All-Stars was a very good depiction of the Negro Leagues. It really was. I could understand that if somebody didn't have a better understanding, they might view it in a somewhat negative way or possibly negative. But it was a pretty good depiction. Not the gambling so much, not the stabbing and stuff that happened, the violence, or the car stealing, things like that. That was an exception. The players were honest. They went out to play ball. But in terms of the fact that they had to put on a show, they were traveling around the country and they didn't have white money behind them. The major leagues had a lot of money, so they had to really sell it. So yeah, they might, be in a little parade coming into town. They might put on a little show during the game. They played a game called Shadow Ball before games and sometimes during in between innings where they would play without a ball, but they made it look like they had a ball, and they did it very, very well. Sometimes they would put a little comedy into it beyond just playing without a ball, but they were talented ball players. They had some really good players. One of the players they had in the early 1950s was named Reese Tatum. His nickname was Goose. Those of you that are basketball fans, you think back to the early Harlem Globetrotters, he was their first big funny man. Goose Tatum was a fabulous athlete who was a tremendous basketball player on the Harlem Globetrotters, but he was a spectacular first baseman playing with the Clowns. He was selected to a couple of all-star teams. I've seen videos of him at first base. The guy was a magician. He was tremendous. So the Clowns had talented players. But going back, I'm sorry, to Bingo Long, it is a good depiction. Not the violence, not the stealing, things like that. That really didn't happen much. There was interplay between owners, pay me to do this, pay me to do that. And those things did happen. Not the violence so much. That was a little overdone. But it was a pretty good depiction of what went on. And again, like I said earlier, teams only had 14 or 13 players. 15, 16 was a lot. This player right now who's playing, I believe, for California, Ohtani, gets all kinds of credit because he was a good pitcher and he gets up to bat and he plays the outfield. That was normal in the Negro Leagues. When you got 14 players on a team and you pitch today, you're not going fishing tomorrow. I need a second baseman or I need a right fielder. So you're playing fielding positions. So when and I don't knock Ohtani, I think it's the writers and the baseball announcers that should be saying he could have played in the Negro Leagues because he does both, which they don't give enough credit to, unfortunately. But the Clowns they stayed in business into the late 1970s. Not totally as a black team at that point, but they were very, very talented. And Billy Vaughn, the bottom, he's a little person, and they always had a little person. They always had somebody in a clown suit. They had a catcher who could catch in a rocking chair. They were very good.
Chair?
Yeah, he could catch. Pepper Bassett was one. I think they had another guy. They had talented players, but again, they had to put on a show. Again, early 50s, people are now gravitating toward white baseball teams to go see the best black players. So they had to really up their show, and they did. And they did it very well. I mean, if I heard a woman was pitching on a man's team, I'd probably go see it. I'd be fascinated by that. And of course, if it was Mamie, I'd enjoy it because we were friends, close friends. Let's move. Anything special? Well, other teams, let me see. Other teams stayed in business, and it was tough. It was very, very hard. I think that as happy as one is that baseball became integrated, there's that sadness that it was going to affect the Negro Leagues. The reality is, though, I mean, what would Jackie Robinson have wanted? What would Dr. King would have wanted? What would anybody have really wanted? I go to games now, and I take a look, usually while I'm at a baseball game, I'll take a look for a moment, just put away the game and look at the players. And I'll see, Horowitz at first base and Johnson at second and Ramirez at short and a whole host of players of different ethnicities playing. And why are they out there? Because they're the best player. And I think that's the way it should be. My big surprise is there hasn't been a woman yet playing Major League Baseball. And I'm sure there's someone out there that's ready. I'm sure of it. So I'm a little disappointed we haven't got a woman yet, but maybe we will. Did someone have something? Yeah.
No, I had a question for you, Phil. So in terms of what I didn't realize until most of our conversations, but this also impacted Hispanic players as well. It wasn't, I mean, we say the Negro Leagues and we say the major leagues, but Hispanics were sort of in the same bucket as Black players as well. So
Absolutely.
when you said Pedro Sierra, like, I don't think people realize that it ran the gamut of players that were not able to play.
Right. The real positive thing again that Jackie Robinson did was he opened it up in terms of race, and the white major leagues were very discriminatory, and regardless of the country you came from, if your skin was dark, you're not playing. And when the major leagues finally started to open up and you started to get Latin American players coming in from Mexico, from Cuba, from Dominican Republic, they were able to play, but again, covered by the quota system. Couldn't have too many dark-skinned people. So that's what held Pedro up. Also, I mean, one of the biggest problems that the Latin American players had was they didn't know the rules of segregation. American Blacks knew what the rules were. The rules were simple. You can't go here. You have to go here. You have to do this. You can't do that. And they had a really tough time. One of my friends used to play. He played for the Cleveland Indians. Great first baseman, Vic Power. Those of you that know baseball, perhaps the best right-handed fielding first baseman in baseball history. Vic was from Puerto Rico, had dark skin, and he had a tough time. He was in Kansas City, and he went into a restaurant, and he sat down to eat, and the waitress came over, and she said, "We don't serve Negroes." He said, "I don't want Negroes, I want rice and beans." But he didn't know the rules. And he wound up, he had to sleep, I think the first couple of nights, he slept in, or he was supposed to sleep at a funeral home. He said to me, he says, "I didn't sleep. I was up all night." So it was particularly difficult on players coming from Spanish-speaking countries in the Caribbean. They had it really hard because they didn't know the rules. You know, Hank Aaron knew the rules, didn't like them. Willie Mays was treated like junk in New Jersey when he came up. And Roy Campanella had a tough time, but they knew the rules. The players from Latin America didn't know the rules, so it was tough on them, really tough. Roberto Clemente, I mean, just so talented, he got beyond everything, and certainly was the greatest of the great Latin Americans to come up, but he learned the rules quickly. Good.
Yeah, and my other question was, what was it like in the towns that they traveled in? I mean, were there bed and breakfasts? Were there Black hotels and Black restaurants? Like, what was their experience?
All right, there's a movie that came out recently called The Green Book. And The Green Book was a real green book. It was a real book, and it told Blacks where they could safely travel, particularly in the South, what hotels they could go to, what restaurants they could go to, what was safe for them. And so the Black players knew this after a while. They still had discrimination to deal with. They still had the dangerous times they could have in the South. And Ted Radcliffe, who was one of my favorite players of all time, he played 1926 to 1950. He was called Double Duty Radcliffe because he was a pitcher and also a catcher. He pitched one game and catch the next. He was spectacular.
Wow, that's insane.
He played in 6 Negro League All-Star games, 3 as a pitcher, 3 as a catcher. And he was a good guy. But in his book, and we were friends, Double Duty and I, and they were in the South one time, and somebody said to him or somebody on a team, if you win this game, we're going to kill you. So they warmed up the bus. They had all their stuff ready. And as soon as the last out was made, they took off of that bus and it just took off.
Wow.
It was dangerous. The South was much more dangerous than the North. Players were safer in the North. They had more places they could go to. But again, not every place, but it was better in the North. South still was very, very dangerous for blacks.
Wasn't there an owner who said, I don't want you on my team anymore because it's too much trouble to?
Oh, yeah. I forget who it was. Two players, Jim Proctor, and I forget this other player. They were dropped from their minor league team because was it Gil who told the story? Yeah, Gil told us the story. Yeah. Gil Black, a former Negro Leaguer, played for Indianapolis Clowns in 1956. Louise and I had lunch with him a few weeks ago, and he told a story of a team. I forget the name of the team. It was a minor league team, but they dropped their two black players because he said, it's too hard for me to try to find a place for you to eat and stay for the night. You know, for the white guys, it was easy to pull into a motel. Wow, I just sold 10 rooms. Well, sorry, not black. So that it was tough. It was still tough. And that was life. You know, I guess blacks understood that that's what you got to do. And those were the rules. You had to follow them. It was tough.
Wow.
Yeah.
There was one person I didn't know. Can you explain Andrew Rube Foster?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, definitely. Put his picture up.
Yeah,
Put his picture up. Andrew Foster was born, I think, in the 1890s or something.
Sure.
And he's easy. You got this?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. He was a great pitcher, came from Texas. He was fat. I mean, there's just no other way to say it. He was big. He was a heavy man, did not look like a baseball player, but oh my goodness, he was a great, great pitcher. You got Willie up. Yeah, there he is. There's Andrew Foster. His nickname was Rube, R-U-B-E. And from 1902 till about 1914, he was one of the top pitchers in the country. Spectacular pitcher. He was so good that the manager of the New York Giants, John McGraw, asked him to teach one of his pitchers how to throw a screwball. A screwball is a ball that curves the other way from a curveball. And the pitcher he taught it to was Christy Mathewson. Mathewson, using that screwball, which he called a fadeaway, became one of the most famous pitchers in baseball history, learning that pitch from Rube Foster.
Wow.
But Foster was also a very, very smart man. And in the late teens, he took over managing the Chicago American Giants. He was a tough manager. You did exactly what he said or you were in trouble. But his team played a lot of hustling baseball, aggressive baseball. This was prior to home runs becoming, the Babe Ruth kind of thing around 1920. But he carried on after that. He always had great players and he liked winning and he liked making money. He also realized that the only way black baseball was going to make more money and survive well was to organize. So in 1920, he invited representatives of 8 teams to Kansas City, where they met and signed a constitution starting the Negro National League. He was the president of the league, and they had to guarantee fields, they had to guarantee money. There were prior attempts to create successful black leagues. They always failed. Money was always the problem. But Foster told these guys, you got to guarantee the money. You have to guarantee it. Well, they did, and they had a successful year in 1920, and it continued on. 3 years after his league started, and that was pretty much in the Midwest, the Eastern Colored League got started by a gentleman named Ed Bolden, who became, he worked with the Hilldale Daisies just around Philadelphia. And a year after that, the Eastern Colored League and the Negro National League had the first Black World Series. And that was very, very successful. They played games in different cities. If you look at the rosters of the teams, loaded with Hall of Famers, loaded with Hall of Famers. But all of this got started because of Foster. And because of that, he's known as the father of the Negro Leagues. He died in 1931. The Negro League folded, and but another league got started. And really, Black baseball had leagues from 1920 until the Negro American League finished 1962, I think. So Foster is really, really the man who deserves all the credit for putting all of this together. In fact, when he first put together the first successful league in 1920, he arranged for trades between teams, knowing that people are going to get tired of watching 10-0 games. So instead of 10-0, 8-0, 15-0, by balancing the league, you had better games. And that's what he did by arranging trades between teams. And the team owners knew it, and it helped them to make money. So that's Rube Foster. Quite a guy, quite a guy. Yeah, really special.
So now there was one question I had. Well, I have a few questions, and I know what your wife said, but someone else asked me to ask you this. Who is your favorite Negro League player?
All of them. John, it is impossible. I mean, I love Double Duty Radcliffe. I love Double Duty Radcliffe. He was a spectacular ball player. Louise wants me to talk about Josh Gibson, and I gladly will. If you put up Josh's picture,
sure.
I'll talk about him. Josh Gibson was born in Georgia, but came up north when he was about 5, 6 years old, and didn't have a big education, but he loved playing baseball. I know he was working in steel mills, I think, when he was 12 years old, and he was powerful. He was powerful. We'll get to Satch in a moment. Oh, keep going. Keep going. There he is. There he is. Josh Gibson always had a smile on his face. 102-degree weather, he's out at the field smiling. He loved to play baseball. He was called, well, some people referred to Babe Ruth as, it referred to Gibson as the Black Babe Ruth. I refer to Babe Ruth as the White Josh Gibson. Babe Ruth, even though he played at Yankee Stadium, never hit a ball out of Yankee Stadium onto the street. Josh Gibson did it multiple times. Yeah. I have a letter here. I'm in my house right now. In my house, I have a letter from a player, Malin Duckett, who played for the Philadelphia Stars, who was there at a game where Gibson hit it out. He described who the pitcher was, where it went out of Yankee Stadium. I've had other players. Larry Kimbrough was there and saw him hit it out. Other players have told me about it. Gene Benson was there and saw him hit it out of the stadium. When I watch Major League games now and I see a guy hit a ball, I go, wow, that went 420 feet. For Josh Gibson, that was nothing. Somebody once asked him, said, Josh, do you have a broken bat that I could have? And he said, I don't break bats, I wear them out. And what did he say? He said, I'm in scoring position when I get into the batter's box. Between all of the home runs he hit in league play and the barnstorming games he played and the games he played in the Caribbean, he had well over 900 home runs, well over 900. Yeah. He was a spectacular power hitter, always had a smile on his face. In 1946, he was ill. He was still pushing and still playing. And my friend Clyde Paris, who you saw a picture of before, was playing in his first game at Yankee Stadium for the New York Black Yankees against the Homestead Grays. And the catcher, of course, was Josh Gibson. And Clyde told me the story. He gets into the batter's box and Gibson looks at him and says, hey, kid, you're new, aren't you? And Clyde said, yes, I am, very politely. And he said, give me a quarter. And he looked at him and he looked, Clyde looked at Gibson like, what do you mean give you a quarter? Like, I got to pay you to play? And then he just laughed. He just was trying to be funny and break the tension that Clyde felt.
Wow.
He was a wonderful, wonderful man. strong as an ox, not very tall, very powerful. If there was a fight, get behind him. No one's getting through him. Get behind Josh Gibson. He was a nice man. He became quite a good catcher. As a young man, a very fast runner. But he was Mr. Power. He and Satchel Paige had legendary contests against each other. One of the things they used to do when teams barnstorm, like Negro League games were generally played Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And during the week, teams would travel around trying to play against anybody to pick up any change they could, any money. So they drive through a town, you got a team, yeah, we'll play you, or they call ahead. And when they did, Satchel Paige guaranteed the first 3 batters would go down on strikes. 9 pitches, 3 out. Gibson guaranteed 2 home runs. Now, for a pitcher to strike a guy out, all you got to do is have the kind of speed that Satchel Paige had as a pitcher. But I know if I'm pitching and this guy hit a home run off me and he's going to hit another one, that ball's not coming down the heart of the plate. I'm going to knock him down. I'm going to throw the ball on a bounce. He hit a lot of balls one-handed. He hit a lot of them off bounces, but he usually kept his word on those 2 home runs. He was spectacular. Let's go to Satchel Paige, because nothing about the Negro Leagues works without Satchel. This is a picture of Satchel Paige in 1967. Paige was born in 1906. Double Duty Radcliffe was born on the same date in 1902 and remembered Satch as a kid. Satch never liked to tell his age, but I know it because Double Duty knew it. And this is a picture of him in 1967 playing for his last professional team, the Miami Marlins. Not the same ones you see now. They were a minor league team. But this is so remarkable because 2 years earlier, in 1965, Paige had been out of baseball maybe for 10 years, 8 years. And the owner of the Kansas City Athletics, who became the Oakland Athletics, his name is Charlie Finley. What he did was he said, we got to get people out to the ballpark. He signed Satchel Paige to pitch 3 innings of a game. Paige opened the game as the starting pitcher in 1965. He was 59 years old. 59 years old. Now, I know Satchel's oldest son, Robert, and Robert told me that Satch was worried about embarrassing himself when he went out onto the field. So for a month before he opened up that game for the Athletics, he had his son, they lived in Kansas City. He had his son put on the catching gear, get in the backyard, and Paige would throw to him to make sure he wouldn't embarrass himself. Robert said, my hand was killing me, because Paige still had speed. He opened the game for the Kansas City Athletics against the Boston Red Sox. He pitched to 10 batters. The only player that got a hit was Carl Yastrzemski. And for those of you that know baseball, Yastrzemski hit against everybody.
Correct.
Everybody. And Paige pitched for 3 innings. He gave up 1 hit. That's unbelievable. But that was Satchel Paige. He was really Mr. Negro Leagues. He was asked once about playing in the major leagues, probably in the 1940s. And he said, I don't need that. I'm making more money than they are. And he was, because he had lots and lots of money. One of the stories I always liked was he would pitch for anybody. And very often his team would rent him out to another team that had a tournament or some game. And he had lots of cash. And he had a trunk in his basement loaded with cash. One day, Mrs. Paige got a phone call from the local candy store. Mrs. Paige, your grandson is buying ice cream and candy for all the kids. The kid found a trunk, took out like a $50 bill, and he was treating all the kids to all the candy they wanted. Satchel then put a lock on the trunk. There's another picture, John, of Paige and Larry Doby. You could put that up. Again, remember, Paige was 59 pitching for the Kansas City Athletics. But Paige was signed in 1948. Larry Doby, again, was the first black to play in the major leagues, in the American League. and he played for the Cleveland Indians. Keep going. Oh, that's Bankhead. No, there's Hank. There we are. There we are. Okay. That's a picture of Satchel Paige on the left and Larry Doby. Larry, go back to Satch and Doby. Oh, I got to talk about Minnie. Yeah, Minnie.
Oh, no, we're right at time. We're a little over time, so we're.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's cool.
But anyway, that was Page in 1948, where he helped lead his team to a World Series. If you can go to Minnie Forbes just for a second, let me mention her because she was an interesting woman. That's with her and her uncle and another woman where I don't know.
This one.
I know what it is. No, that's the team. No, this John. I don't know if you can see this. Yeah, that's Minnie Forbes. That's the lady on the right. The gentleman in the middle is Ted Raspberry. He was Minnie's uncle, and he owned the Detroit Stars. Well, the Negro Leagues, the early 50s, were having trouble, and the Kansas City Monarchs sold their team to Ted Raspberry. Now he owned two teams, and the league said you can't own two teams, conflict of interest. So he sold the Detroit Stars to his niece, Minnie. She's on the right. She was his secretary, and she knew the running of the team. He kind of ran it, but very often, she really was the owner of the team. And Minnie, by the way, lives up in Michigan. I just heard about it today. My friend Paige, she was ill, but she's doing great. And she'll probably call me tonight. Every now and then, Ted Raspberry would say to her, Minnie, we need a third baseman, get in uniform. So she's another woman who played in the Negro Leagues, but she doesn't get the kind of press that Mamie Johnson got or Connie Morgan or Tony Stone because she wasn't a regular player. But she did play, and she's a very, very nice woman, sharp as a tack, and still a sweetheart. Thank you.
Well, Phil, I want to say, I know a bunch of people dropped off after 3 o'clock. We're like 8 minutes over, but listen, even looking at the chat, everyone, this is really informative. You were unbelievable. I know people actually want more, even for the people who stayed, because I know they're late for their 3 o'clock meetings, just from the Black Leadership Network. And as a friend, I want to thank you so much for doing this. I do appreciate it. And I thank you for taking the time. But I know we have 11 people on here, and the thing that you do the best, you haven't done yet. And I want to end, and you know what I'm going to say, right? What do you have to do? You have to do a joke, Phil. You got to do a joke, Phil. And that's how we'll end this call. We have to end this call on a joke. I can't believe you didn't do it yet, but we have to end this call on the joke, and then we will close it out. But thank you, Louise, you and Louise, for doing this. But if you can do one joke, and then that's how we'll end it.
One of the things that I'll say sometimes in a game, maybe to an umpire, another player, the bases, each base in baseball is 90 feet apart. And I always say, what takes longer to run, from first base to second base, or from second base to third base, and why? Of course, the correct answer between first base, second base, third base, it takes longer to run from second base to third base. And that's because right in the middle, there's a short stop. Okay, John?
That was good. Thank you very much, Phil.
Wonderful. It was my pleasure. Thanks again to you and to my wife.
Thanks, everyone, for joining in.
Bye, John.
And take care, guys. Thanks again. Have a good day, man.
You too.
Wonderful.
All right.